I'm Jessica Anne Pressler, and you've tuned into Your Traitor Within, a podcast that exposes the brutal truths of healing, self-discovery, and breaking free from relentless patterns of self-sabotage. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Amy Watkins, therapist, speaker, and author whose work is dedicated to helping women uncover their childhood patterns that quietly shape their lives, break free from toxic cycles, and finally choose themselves. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it sits right at the heart of everything we talk about here when we talk about the traitor within. Amy, I am honored to have you here to discuss the traitor within concept and your work, and for your vulnerability when you share your own story of your traitor within. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm glad we finally get a chance to meet.
I know sometimes with this social media stuff, we see each other.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
almost like we know each other, but
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
but then to finally, and I love the work that you do. And as you see, it's pretty obvious that it definitely aligns with the traitor within concept.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that I know that you help women who you help them figure out what that traitor within is, and then help them, thrive, right?
Yeah. Actually, I help a lot of men also, but it
Oh,
does
good
get
to know. Okay.
it does get focused a lot on women, but I
Mhm.
get a shocking amount of responses from men
I
who
am.
who find my information so helpful. So I just want to put that out there also
No,
that
I'm
men,
glad you did. And if I knew that, I would
yeah.
have shared that. I think that's wonderful. And when I've had men on the show, I always point out that I'm really happy that they're there because it allows men to feel more comfortable about talking about their mental health,
Yeah.
and which is really important, and hopefully really, take away some of the shame that
Yeah.
they feel. So I'm really happy to hear that you're helping men
Yeah.
as well
We
as women.
really do focus on childhood patterns and how they have shaped, how we move in the world and how we do relationship, because I
Mm-hmm.
really do believe that we can't, go through life learning and being sort of downloaded with these patterns and then suddenly become a well-functioning member of society, and all of that switches at 18 just isn't really realistic. So helping people uncover their patterns to be able to live more authentically is kind of my goal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Someone once asked me when I was on someone else's podcast, what's recovery to me? And I said, recovery to me is being free to live a life that's authentic to me. Get
Yes.
rid of all that stuff.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
yes. Yeah.
yeah. So you also obviously believe that it's important to know what goes on in your childhood when we
Mhm.
help our clients. And I know that there are therapies out there that don't do that. I certainly understand with crisis therapy, you can't. I get
Yeah.
that. Even so, I hope long-term people do because
Mhm.
you just try to get someone over, within, and a lot of it's run by insurance companies, which, say you have 6 weeks to take care of
Yeah.
someone, and it doesn't do, it
For all
does,
of that.
right, exactly. It may be a little bit of a help, but
Yeah.
not, long term. But I,
Yeah.
like you, do believe that to really understand ourselves and to be able to heal and be the best authentic self, we need to understand our childhood.
Yeah.
And in regard to the traitor within, it starts in the childhood. It's
Mhm.
a time where a child will not feel safe in some way, emotionally safe, at least in some way. And how do they learn to cope? And they learn
Mhm.
from messaging and modeling around them, and they learn from trial and error, and they figure out a way to cope, and it works because when you're a child, you don't necessarily have the choice to leave or to find new parents or whatever it is that you are dealing with. So you take something that works,
Mhm.
maybe not ideally, but it keeps you feeling at least somewhat safe.
Yeah.
And then you can take that coping mechanism into adult relationships or how you see the world or how you see yourself. It could be at work, it could be in romantic relationships, although a lot of it does play out in romantic relationships because you're more vulnerable and and then it becomes somewhat of an inner saboteur, and
Yeah.
we feel familiar in certain cycles, and we that's what we know how to do, and we can get stuck in self-saboteur. So how does that align with your work?
Yeah, I really believe we make adaptations in childhood just to survive. So if you think about the cavemen times, if you get tossed out of the tribe, you're going to get eaten by the tiger, right?
Mhm.
And so just similarly in our family of origin, we're wired to belong and we're wired to do what we need to do to stay safe and to survive. And our parents are the bringers of the food.
Mhm.
Without
Yeah.
them, and we're little toddlers, right? Or little infants, we can't survive without our parents. So if they're the bringers of the food, and without them, we will die.
Mhm.
So if we're always, asking for our needs, if we're asking to be held or lifted up and nobody ever comes, eventually we stop asking, and
Mhm.
we adapt and learn that if they're not here to meet our needs, we must then be here to meet theirs.
Mhm.
So yeah, we adapt, and that just follows us into adult relationships. How could it not? Right. So
Mhm.
if I'm used to adapting and surviving and not having a need, not even knowing what my needs might be because I stopped asking,
Mhm.
I'm not going to know how to even ask for them in a relationship. And that will feel very normal and very familiar.
Because all I know how to do is please that other person so that they don't reject me.
That's all I know how to do.
For
That's literally
example.
all I know how to do.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
not even feel foreign because that's what I was wired
Right.
to do.
So, which is confusing because if it doesn't feel foreign, then what?
Yeah.
And usually it works for a while.
A long
And,
while, right?
and
Until it
it
doesn't.
until it doesn't. But
Yeah.
then you don't know what to do. You just keep doing it again and again, and it doesn't.
Well, there's this sense inside too that it doesn't feel good.
Mhm.
I don't like it. I also don't know anything else. I don't like it. I also feel some resentment or
Mhm.
something doesn't feel aligned, but I
Mhm.
also I don't have any other skills to draw from.
Right.
So when that breaks,
Mhm.
we learn there's something else that has to be done.
I
Yeah.
once had it was happened to have been a gentleman who counseled like a boys club, girls club type of thing. He would go in and and we talked about how he could go in and teach these skills it was like the tweens. I think it was like the young adolescents or the pre-adolescent age group. And that's who he was talking to and how he could try to undo some of the stuff that was going on in childhood in order for them to, I mean, not undo it completely because obviously it needs to work, but
Yeah.
also teach them other skills so that
Yeah.
it can prevent
Hmm.
this. And I thought if we could get kids young and teach them.
I wonder about that too. I'm so
Mhm.
curious how young we can get them and get them to learn those skills because we're still so wired to connect and
I
want
know.
love and belonging from our parents. We
Well,
chase it. We really
it,
do.
it has to be as an alternative. Maybe it's something that you can't change them to act the way they act in their home because they go back to their home. So unless
Yep.
we're going to walk in and sit there, and which is a great thing to be able to do and teach everyone how to function,
Yep.
they still have to go back home. So it's more teaching them maybe alternatives so that when they are faced with a different relationship, they could pick something else. And
Yeah.
also self-worth, a lot of
Yeah.
self-worth building skills so that they don't rely on, you
Yeah.
rely on your parents because you have to, but maybe you don't rely on that other person, that
Yeah.
partner in your life the same way. Because as you know, particularly in narcissistic relationships, for example, they're the all-time savior. They're the only ones that make you feel better. You think, I mean, they're not, but it's what you feel in the moment.
Mhm.
So when and maybe
Mhm.
if it could be, if I mean, I'm just talking, with you, some ideas too, if we can
Yeah.
get
Well,
it
I think
early and teach them other ways.
yeah, there's an element to that, in childhood when your nervous system is only dysregulated, right? When you've never experienced that safety and co-regulation in childhood, you don't even know. I should say, I never even knew what it was like to
Mhm.
be regulated.
Mhm.
And so in the narcissistic relationship dynamic, when
Mhm.
someone is kind of controlling your emotional regulation, your nervous system regulation, that feels normal.
Mhm.
It was a long time for me until I actually regulated. I
Mhm.
knew what it actually felt like in my body to be safe, that I
Mhm.
could feel what it was like when somebody else was in control of my nervous system, for lack of a better explanation, right? When someone
Mhm.
had wired me to
Mhm.
respond to them in such a way, I couldn't
Mhm.
even acknowledge it until I had some felt sense of safety in my
Mhm.
own body.
And when was that? When did you feel that sense of safety?
Honestly, Jessica, this for me, the felt sense of genuine safety was last year. I mean, I
Mhm.
have worked through it. I've talked about it a lot with
Mhm.
clients, but my
Mhm.
actual felt sense of safety was the last year for me that I've really started to understand all the things that I've talked about for a really long time.
Mhm. And
Nervous
are
regulation.
you proud of yourself?
Oh my gosh, I'm so proud of myself
Good.
because to actually experience it, what you've talked about
Mhm.
in a felt sense sort of way
Right.
is a very different than
Mhm.
just the textbook or the,
Of course.
the
Yeah.
trainings, to have the embodied experience is very different.
So of
So,
course it's wonderful for you without question, but also it makes you a better therapist.
well, and now I get to help people walk through it because I know actually the
Mhm.
steps that it took me to get through it. So that's just
Right.
different than reading it in a book
Oh yeah.
and, showing someone a passage in the book.
Of
Yeah,
course. No,
for sure.
absolutely. So since you are talking a little bit about yourself, can you tell us your Traitor Within story?
Yeah, to that end, it took me such a long time to understand the traitor within, which you've
Mhm.
probably seen a little bit unfold on my Instagram,
Mhm.
because I had an understanding of the trauma that took place in childhood, but
Mhm.
not fully how it shaped
Mhm.
my life and the patterns that I was living inside for my whole life. So I understood it to the level that, I'd seen therapists and I was doing my own work, and my body had been so unsafe for so long that I wasn't able to put all the pieces together. And
Mhm.
so as I created more safety within myself, of course, some of the things that I had forgotten came back. And as
Mhm.
I put those pieces together, I really had a sense of, oh, my childhood was so unsafe. It
Mhm.
was so I was not able to look at it at all, that I just checked out and I became a version of myself that I needed to be to
Mhm.
survive. So I learned that most of my personality was a trauma response, if not
Mhm. Mhm.
all. So the traitor within was what kept me alive. It
Right.
allowed me to survive, which was very maladaptive at best. And I thought I was fundamentally bad and wrong. I grew up with a lot of shame, and a lot of religious shame was put on top of the shame of just me existing.
Mhm.
I grew up in fundamental religion, was high control.
Mhm.
But there was also my parents also had some of their own disorder.
Mhm.
Something else was happening in there. So there was just shame upon shame upon shame. And I fundamentally learned that my existence was bad. And
Wow.
so I was deprived of
Mhm.
most developmental
Mhm.
normalcy.
And
But even
the joy of childhood, the joy that children feel when they can just play and be a child.
there was no joy. Yeah.
Mhm.
We talked a lot about joy. We talked
But
a lot about the joy of the Lord, but I don't remember ever experiencing any joy of
Mhm.
childhood. So, yeah, but that took me so long to unravel that
Mhm.
that was what I lived through, but it wasn't who I was.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And now you're who you are. And of course you're always growing because we all
I think we're always growing.
right.
And I think I don't know that there's ever an end to that. I
Which is
think we
good.
all
That's a good
like an
thing.
end to that.
Yeah.
When did I arrive? But yeah, now I finally have, come into what is
Mhm.
who I was supposed to have.
So the messaging and modeling that you had, the person you had molded yourself into being to be accepted, maybe not abandoned. I don't know what the core is.
It, I mean, for me, it was just a shell of a person. I was trying to be whatever anybody needed me to be. So
So
if I,
you like a chameleon, or do you think or were you just set by what the church said, or what your parents wanted? What was
I mean, it was what my parents wanted, but I could never seem to make them happy no matter what I did.
right?
So that I was very much damned if I did and damned if I didn't. There
And
was,
I want to just before we pass that for 2 seconds, that's
yep,
not your fault, right? You know that you could never fill that, and
yes,
okay, and it was who they,
yes,
it's them, not you. I know that,
yes. But I didn't know
of
that for
course, especially a child. Yeah.
and so I lived my life outside of myself. So
Hmm.
I dissociated and just disconnected from myself from a very young age. And then more so once I had experienced some sexual abuse and I was not protected and they knew, you know. So
I'm
I
sorry.
I had spent I actually disconnected from myself, and most of my life I watched from outside of myself. So
Hmm.
I had the experience of just sort of watching
Hmm.
myself as though I were being judged by everybody, and I became my own critique, basically. So yeah, it's been a
First of all, I'm
challenging,
sorry. So sorry for
challenging
what you've been
lifetime.
through.
Yeah.
No, but I'm so sorry. It's something that no one should ever go through, not for
Yeah.
a second. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's understandable that you would respond the way you did. How, to survive, to still live.
To survive. Yeah.
Mhm.
It, nobody wants to go through trauma. People say what didn't kill you makes you stronger, and none of us want to experience that just to be strong. So many of us that have gone through trauma just don't want to have to be strong anymore, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I do believe at this point I couldn't be sitting here with you having had not gone through all of those things.
Mhm.
So
That I
it's,
understand.
for me, it's just a very dual relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what allowed you to feel safe enough to go back to you, to get back in your body,
I had a real awakening, a real spiritual awakening
Mhm.
where I really, uh, I was living in the same patterns over and over and over.
Mhm.
In one relationship specifically that I could not get out of. I could not see reality. I didn't want to see. Maybe I could. I didn't want to see reality.
Mhm.
And having to walk away from that relationship all but killed me. And I was so trauma bonded to
Mhm.
that person that when I finally chose myself and left, I wasn't still choosing myself. I was walking the walk and trying to choose myself, but it was
Mhm.
actually after choosing myself that I I just lost everything, and it was in the losing everything that
Mhm.
I was forced to grieve it all,
Mhm.
because it wasn't actually that person that I was so bonded to. It was just the grief of my dad, and the grief of, the childhood I had never had, and all of the lack of protection that I never experienced, and trying to get this person to choose me because I
Mhm.
had never been chosen. And
Mhm.
if I could just get this person to see me and love me the way that I needed to be, then I would be okay.
Mhm.
And when I finally got to the deep grief and realized, oh, I have to actually choose myself,
Mhm.
and I'm not talking, it was not a month. We're talking like a year of pretty deep, uh, painful grief
Mhm.
and loneliness. I think that a lot of us think that healing is going to be this, you know, I don't know, angelic experience where we finally feel good. And I found it to be quite the opposite. If,
I think it's an important thing to note because I mean and you're a practitioner also. I know even in my office, sometimes when things get too painful, people will walk away and stop it,
yeah,
and maybe come back, hopefully come back at some point. But
yeah,
it's a painful process,
yeah,
and I don't want people to think it's not, so they're not surprised.
yeah.
But when you come out the other end,
I just said that to a client today. I'm like, it is lonely. It's so lonely. And on the other side of that is the freedom.
hmm
It's just really getting through that lonely, and
hmm
and really even in the freedom is sometimes lonely, right? And
hmm
you end up with yourself.
right,
It's
right,
such it's a definitely a more beautiful lonely. I
yeah,
mean,
right, yeah.
it's just such a difficult place because you want to heal, and really the healing is in the choosing you and letting go of whatever else, and that's lonely.
And letting go is tough.
Oh,
And that
it's
stuff is,
brutal.
it's brutal. And it's stuff that's been with you potentially for your forever, whatever that is.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
and your body believes it was keeping you safe. It was,
Yeah.
and it's
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what it's wired to do, right?
correct.
Self-protect,
It,
whether
it,
that's avoidance or anxiety or chasing or maintaining connection, whatever that is, it's how
it,
do I.
and that's, but I hope, and hope for you too, that that this part of us, although it was hurting us,
Mhm.
meant well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hopefully we have compassion for ourselves and understanding. It's just was
Yeah.
very misguided.
Yeah. Very. Mhm.
So how did you show up in relationships and how do you show up now?
How did I? Toxic.
hmm
I think, I wanted to place blame on the other person and point. the finger at the other person and say, you know, why did they do this? And how did they do this? But I think I was equally as toxic in that I didn't know that I had needs. I didn't know that I could ask for things. You know, it took me a long time to understand that the resentment that I was feeling was because I wasn't having I didn't have a sense of self, you know, so I did a lot of people pleasing, right? Part of me didn't have any other idea that there was anything else out there, which I think for a lot of us, that's the case.
Yeah.
But it's also manipulative, right? If we people please, then we're actually trying to get someone to stay and love us, which is just our way of manipulating, and they're manipulating in a different way. So,
and then often when you're people pleasing, then you resent what you're doing for them. Sure.
Yeah.
You're the one who's people pleasing.
Well, because why doesn't anyone see me the way that I'm doing for them? And right. So then there's strings attached, and it's a tally and a scoreboard. And I was avoidant. And I really wanted independence, and I couldn't get independence, but I put that on the other person, thinking, why won't they give it to me? Instead of like, I'm allowed to be independent. I'm allowed to take my own independence. Right. So we put it on the other person a lot. I mean, I had an affair, you know, in my first marriage, I had an affair. I didn't have any communication skills. I had no idea how to be in relationship with another person. If I'm being really honest, I had no business being married because I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know how to request or even communicate in a way that would suggest that we were in a relationship. I only knew how to comply.
Okay.
So I was perfect for someone who wanted a compliant person. Right. And so I was probably a 35-year-old, 15-year-old. You know, I just hadn't actually matured into any kind of adulthood, and I was trying to do adult relationships. So I think I was equally as, when you're in, you need both people for it to be toxic. Right. So if
one allows it, even if the person's not toxic, but they're allowing it, they're staying there.
Right. Like if
Although I want to point something out, because I have to always do this, especially when you know, no matter what, though, when someone's a victim of abuse, it is still the abuser's fault. And I always have to clarify that. Even when I'm talking about the traitor and telling people their traitor's keeping them there, it's still the abuser's fault.
Absolutely.
And they often, as you pointed out, you know, you said you were people, you know, so that person knows that. So they kind of walk hand in hand. I always had this image of the traitor within with the toxic individual holding hands and working together, because they learn who you are. And as you said, people are going to be attracted to someone who is going to give in, is going to get their needs met, whatever it is that they have. So it is a perfect match. Some people will say in heaven, and some people will say in, you know, the other side, what's down below.
I mean, they will study you, right? They can almost smell your vulnerability, right? So it doesn't mean that it's not their fault. It's the abuser's fault for abusing.
Right.
And they wire you, they brainwash you with the gaslighting and the manipulation. It literally changes how you function in the relationship.
Correct.
Right? And we overlook so many things going into it. We overlook the red flags because they feel normal. I always say, when you're raised in chaos and abuse, right, the red flags don't look red. They look like a Tuesday.
Right.
It's just our norm. So when they gaslight or lie, that feels like, oh, I know how to do that. I've been there before. So it's, it's and.
Right. And I always felt that one of my traitor within ways of handling things is cognitive dissonance. So you just, you know, talk away, you make excuses, you do whatever it is to make it sense. So for the moments, because I would have moments of questioning things, but then my traitor within would come in and say, oh, no, you know, or make excuses. And nothing's better than for a therapist to hear that the significant other had a difficult childhood. Right. Let's make it better. Let's, you know, of course, it's okay that you know, hit me yesterday because you have anger stuff, and let me love you enough that you didn't get, so then you won't do that anymore. You know,
our empathy, right? On high drive empathy. And we're always understanding, because if we can fix it, right? If I'm the problem, that means I can do something about it and I can fix it. If I can fix it, it will work. If it's a lot harder to look at the person in front of me, the partner, and say, oh, I've actually been manipulated and I've been used.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing has not been real.
Mm-hmm.
Way
It's a
easier.
very painful thing to do. And so
Yeah.
when we're doing when we educate, and I'll speak for myself, when I educate and talk about narcissistic abuse and a narcissist and what they do to manipulate you, and then even having to say the words, they don't love you. They don't
Mhm.
love you like love. They may feel, and I definitely think that they do have that high in the beginning because they're getting their needs met. When they're getting narcissistic supply, when they feel like you're mirroring back, you're wonderful and and you're smart, whatever it is that they feel what we're telling them,
Yeah.
they do feel like they're in love. So I
Mhm.
don't, because they're getting the high of their supply,
Yeah.
but it's hard to, tell somebody, but it's not love like, love. It's not that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's hard to do. But I think the more we educate people on their tactics and
Mhm.
how they think, the more that the other person could understand, A, it's not their fault for the way they act.
Yeah.
And I think they're pretty predictable. So,
Very predictable.
very simple. And
Yeah.
when we get that, then there are ways to keep ourselves safe,
Yeah.
at least as safe as possible, if we
Mhm.
must still engage.
Yeah. Like being able to really look at reality and not just, I will often say the pretty words, because the pretty words sound nice, right? So if you're sitting in front of your partner and they everything is fine, because we have the cycle, right, where everything's fine,
Yeah.
and then we go into well, now things are not fine, and then now things are really not fine, and oh, things are fine again,
Mhm.
in those moments of fine, what's actually fine?
Mhm.
Is it fine because you're not speaking up, you're not needing anything, you're
Right.
not
What have you
mentioning?
done to make it fine? What have you given up?
What have you given up, right? I've
Right. To
given
make it.
up, I've given up. So in my case, I've given up needing you to communicate with me. I've given up needing you to meet me in any real way. So as long as I don't need that, we're good.
Right.
We're good.
Which
But
is,
if I need it, now we're not good.
which is why so many of us at the end of a relationship like this, where did we go? You know,
Learn to not need.
we learn to not need.
And so they want you to stay compliant and just not
Mhm.
speak about how you're being treated. As soon as you
Mhm.
speak about it, now you're difficult.
Mhm. I was just talking to someone today about that. If a person wanted to manipulate a narcissist, if they wanted to stay in a relationship, let's say and I've seen it with like you're 24 years old and you're with a guy who's 55 years old, which is all fine. I'm not judging that at all. But you're beautiful and they're getting their needs met because you're 25 years old and you're beautiful and and, and they start, maybe they're looking at other women also, whatever it is that's upsetting you. If you just don't say anything and if you just continue to tell them they're wonderful or you give them the crazy ride that they need or whatever, or the chaos that even sometimes they need it too. The chaos,
Mhm.
if they feel caused it, you
Mhm.
give them the power and the control and all the needs, then you could live this
Yeah.
external. I mean, it's an external life. You're not going to get the internal because they're not capable. But there's. I'm not saying anyone should manipulate into a relationship, but but I'm just saying there is a way with knowledge you can go either way, but you can also keep yourself safe
Yeah.
and realize that this is what it's going to be. It's most likely going to be this way your entire relationship. And if, you can learn to make it more peaceful if you can't leave, like, we talk about gray rock
Yeah.
emotionally separate yourself somehow, which is really hard to do, but,
Mhm.
do things that create self-esteem separately from that person. And there's a ways to do it, which will make,
Mhm.
if you do leave, easier.
Yeah.
Um, but again, it comes down to knowledge, which I believe at least that's why I continue to educate people about
Mhm.
that piece.
Yeah. I also noticed what happens when you stop doing the things that you've
Yeah.
always done. Like
And
what happens when you just stop filling in the silence or filling in the gaps or being the one that plans everything or being the one who just picks up when the conversation lags, and then you start to notice
Mhm.
how much work you're doing,
Huh?
the emotional labor that you're doing,
Mhm.
because very often you're kind of being consumed. Your emotional labor is being consumed, And when you stop,
Mhm.
like if the woman can really just stop
Mhm.
and pause
And see and look.
see and wait to see if the partner actually picks up and they actually get curious about how you're feeling and what, what's happening with you,
Mhm.
or if they're just waiting for you to show back up and keep
Mhm.
caring and you're the engine of the relationship. It's a lot
Mhm.
of information.
Mhm.
Then am I in a relationship with myself, or am I in a
Yeah.
relationship with
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
somebody
There's a ton of, they talk about red flags, red flags. I don't love doing the whole red flags things because things can look different ways,
else?
but there are certain ones
Mhm.
that, will- will- and one of which also is if you say anything that even resembles a criticism,
Mhm.
how are they going to react?
Yeah.
And I'll hear stories about people in a first or second date, and they may say something like, "Oh, you didn't park in the space." I mean, something that's so like no one would, it'd be like laughing if it was,
Yep.
and they explode.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter. We don't have to put a label on them and call them a narcissist. We don't have to do that. The point is that's a person who's highly explosive when they, any side, maybe
Yeah.
that's a red flag.
It's just testing. It's testing behavior, right?
Yeah.
They test to
Right.
see how much you'll put up with, how much you'll tolerate. And I will always tell people it's a spectrum. The
Yeah.
narcissism is a spectrum.
Right.
We're all on it.
Yeah.
The self-confident side that helps us get up and do our best work and look our best, and then the
Mhm.
actual disorder over here.
Mhm. Right.
And whether they are or they aren't, I will tell clients, doesn't
It doesn't-
actually matter all that much. What
Right.
matters is what's the unhealed, wounded part of you, right? The little
Mhm.
traitor within that
Mhm.
finds their behavior acceptable and tolerable and sometimes attractive, that keeps
Mhm.
us stuck
Mhm.
in that cycle. Because if we look at that and we can
Mhm.
heal that, their behavior is disgusting eventually. Like we
Mhm.
don't want to be part of it eventually.
Right. And it doesn't even, like I said, doesn't even have to be labeled. It doesn't matter if they're a narcissist or not. It matters that you're being mistreated.
Yeah,
And you know what? They have a traitor within too. That's what's controlling them as well.
absolutely.
Except it's
Yeah.
hurting you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
But it doesn't matter if they're, it's
right.
people in general. Do I like how
Right.
I'm being
That's right.
engaged with anybody? And you
Right.
find that people fall away pretty quick when you start having boundaries and start
Right.
liking
And that's a
yourself.
great test for the normal
Yeah.
boundaries that you were
Yeah.
not used to doing as a child. But you
Yeah.
have to, uh, and start caring about yourself. That's not what they want either.
I do not. Yeah.
So,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
back to you for a moment, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
No.
So I want to, and you don't have to share this, but I think you have in some of your, tell me a little bit about the religious piece of shaping you.
Well, it's all I ever really knew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe I should say that's not necessarily true. I remember younger years of not full religion. My
Mm-hmm.
parents, I think, sort of became religious maybe when I was 6,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty fuzzy. I'm not really sure because I do remember watching like The Guiding Light with my mom.
Uh-huh.
My
Right.
younger years, like I have a
Yeah.
little bit of that memory.
Mm-hmm.
They were very, very strict, like unusually strict. And then the religion, I think, gave them something to kind of base that on, or something
Mm-hmm.
they could use to enforce their strictness, is kind of what it felt like. I was the youngest of 4, and the
Okay.
other 3 had very different rules to live by. So usually the youngest gets away with a lot more.
Right. Boys though, older or older?
2 older brothers and an older sister.
Okay.
And so they had a lot more leeway, a lot more freedom than I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've heard that my dad had plans to kind of evangelize and go on the road, and then my mother got pregnant with me and I sort of thwarted his plan, and maybe that caused some resentment. But
Mm-hmm.
either way, it was very black and white religion. It was, my dad believed he had, a direct route between him and God. And he was very much into Jimmy Swaggart. He wanted to evangelize with Jimmy Swaggart. He believed he was going to evangelize. Like he had some, what felt like delusions.
Mm-hmm.
But all I knew was no matter what I did, it wasn't enough to be
Mm-hmm.
saved enough for them. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just had letters upon letters from my dad that I needed to get my life right. And I just couldn't quite figure out
Mm-hmm.
what he thought I wasn't doing right.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would try this and that wasn't right. And I would try this and that wasn't right. And there was so much fear around like hell and fire and the rapture, since I'm as small as I can remember going into their bedroom at night, hoping that their bodies were still there so that I hadn't missed the rapture.
Oh,
So my
wow. Oh, I'm
childhood
sorry.
was so full of fear.
Fear. Yeah.
I mean, fear that they were alive, fear that I would not be okay, fear that I'd be left behind. And we watched movies, the Left Behind series. I don't know if you're familiar with the Left Behind
No. What is
series,
that?
but
Mm-mm.
it's a series on the tribulation, like what happens after the rapture, and then how do you not go to hell after the rapture, and how do you survive the tribulation. And it was, my family didn't tell stories. We didn't sit around the table and talk about your day. We talked about the rapture and tribulation and the world ending all of
Mhm.
the time.
How
So it was just
terrifying.
relentless fear that I lived inside. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then, when something bad happened to me when I was sexually abused, that was sort of my fault. So that was something that I I called a cause to happen to me because of my existence. So it just sort of kept reinforcing that I
Now,
was mentally
that was
bad.
what you felt, I guess, because of what, but you also went to them and they didn't help you, or what
Yeah,
happened?
I did. I went to my mom right after the first time he kissed me. I went to my mom and she just said, "Don't tell your dad." And then kept allowing me to go back. And then later, when my dad had found out, when I told him, he said, "The Lord told me to come look in the window because, I felt like you were being hurt, but I just didn't." So there's a
Oh,
lot of messages that I had gotten that I wasn't worth protecting. And this was just something that was supposed to happen to me. And if I hadn't dressed a certain way, then I wouldn't, have experienced it. And, you know, abuse is one thing that children can get past when they have an authority figure that treats them with self-worth and dignity, and
yeah.
and shows them that that's not what was supposed to happen, and I love you so much and how can I help you through it.
Hmm.
It's a very different experience when the authority figures blame you for it and shame you for it,
And not
because
just an authority figures, those are your parents.
your parents,
That's
right,
your
the people
parents.
who are supposed to love you more than anything in the world, right,
Right.
are telling you that now this is your fault.
Oh gosh.
As a child, you don't know where to put that. You
Of
don't know
course.
how to, there's nowhere else to put it except to believe that it must be true.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
that's how your identity gets shaped and built, that
Mm-hmm.
I'm fundamentally bad. And these things happen to me because of that. And people who are supposed to love me believe that's true.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a whole lot you can do with that.
Of course. Even a
Yeah.
grown-up would feel the same way if they
Yeah.
went to someone they trusted and asking for help or
Yeah.
support.
Yeah.
Oh,
So yeah, it was very cult like. So most of my mother's the oldest of 10.
oh
And
wow.
so she went the
Mm-hmm.
religion route and the others did not. But my core family are very much still in that religion sect, whatever you want to call it. So I don't have much contact with any of my family at all. Yeah.
Even your siblings. Your siblings were also. Okay.
Hmm. With my siblings. Yeah.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
about that too.
It's very sad, when you have a narcissistic family, that's pretty common that they play the siblings against each
Yeah,
other. It's
absolutely.
it's pretty it's that's a fairly common thing that happens, and it is sad. It's
Mhm.
very sad. And I think even when you are estranged from your family, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't miss the family. It just
Right.
means,
You're keeping yourself safe.
yeah, and you're still miss, a lot of the parts of it, a lot of the what you wish that it could have been.
Right. The grief. I mean, you do, hopefully you went through a
So
grieving or
much
allowing
grief.
yourself to grieve
Yeah.
that as well as yourself, as this person that you had,
So
yeah,
much grief. Yeah.
created.
Yeah.
I had gone to, there was a thing called Denim Day the other day. That's once, do you know about that?
Mm-mm.
And I went to a rally about it in LA. And Denim Day is 1998 and I may get the story a little bit botched. In 1998 in Italy, there was a court case where a woman had been wearing tight jeans during her sexual assault, during her rape. And because she was wearing tight jeans, there's an assumption that she gave consent because she had to help them get the jeans off. There's no way they would have gotten the jeans off. And
Wow.
because of that happened, it's starting in that was 98, 99. They started this, remember this for this woman that,
Mhm.
that it's not consent. It's not consent to have tight jeans. It's not
Mhm.
consent. A million reasons. If you're raped, you're being raped, and
Mhm.
it's not your fault. And so every year on Denim Day,
Wow.
which was Wednesday, they, it's talked about, and Peace Over Violence is the name of the organization that
Wow. Yeah.
and I can send you stuff on it if you want.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose is, we believe you. And it talks about, and I did a blog on it last week, and
Mhm.
I talk about that, the secondary pain, is the not believing you. That
Not
it's
being.
hard enough to go through the assault or the rape, but then
Mhm.
to go to someone and tell them and not be believed is,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just even compounded, right? When you're not believed.
Mhm.
And that follows you in other ways too, right? You
It
just
follows you
assume that
in.
you're not believed in other areas of your life,
Of
which
course.
leads to us over explaining, and we keep trying to explain one more time because maybe this time they'll believe us. There's so many ways that shows up in our patterns.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Exactly. So do
Yeah.
you feel now that you're you, that you are, and as you're growing, you'll continue to
Yeah,
grow.
I think as I'm growing, I'm still understanding more and more of my authentic self. I last year, I started posting on Instagram and I was terrified of being seen. And so if
Mhm.
anybody's seen it from the beginning to now, you'll see the sort of evolution of me
Mhm.
starting with being terrified of being seen until now being more okay being seen, but
Mhm.
still there's still a lot that happens, kind of talking myself through being seen, because that was one of my biggest core wounds, was the
Mhm.
fear of being
Mhm.
seen, because I was not allowed to be seen or heard, right? So
Mhm.
be invisible, and
Mhm.
when you're not invisible, be perfect or you're in trouble. So there was just this
Mhm.
real deep fear of being judged no matter
And it sounds like you never got to know what that perfect little girl was because he
what.
never
Right.
told you. He just told you it was not.
Just
So
was not. Yeah.
you're never going to feel like you're perfect because you're going to.
Yeah. So there's I think there's still a sense of becoming,
Hmm.
and way more now than I would know myself now more than I ever did, which is nice. And there's been a lot of loss with that. I don't have relationships with my daughters, and with my family, and there's a lot of loneliness, and
Mhm.
I've got myself, which is, you know, there are days that feels still hard, but most days that finally is at a place where that feels enough.
Mhm.
So,
Did your
yeah.
daughters side with your family? What happened with your daughters?
My daughters, so, because of how, we grow up, our parents had parents that had parents, and it just sort of gets funneled down, right? And I
Mhm.
do believe that parents do the best they can, and sometimes their best is harmful. And so
Mhm.
I too did the best that I knew how, and my best was very much like what my mom
Uh-huh.
did. I was a shell of myself, so I didn't know how to communicate, and I was inconsistent, and I never knew what a boundary was. And
Mhm.
I want to say that my ex-husband alienated them, entirely, but I had a part in that, right?
Mhm.
Because I parented in an inconsistent way, so I
Mhm.
gave him a lot of ammunition,
Mhm.
right? So it was both and. He did turn them against me, and
Mhm.
I gave him a lot. I
To
gave him,
use.
I gave him a lot of ammunition.
Mhm.
So I don't believe that kids turn their back on their parents without some help.
Mhm.
As someone who chased after her parents for a very, very long time, even after having been treated the way that I was,
Mhm.
children want to belong. They
Mhm.
want the love of their parent, and so there has to be something in there that
Mhm.
uh, helps them with their view or their perception of their other parent, to be able to just, you know,
Mhm.
um, completely want nothing to do, especially when there's a willingness to repair.
Mhm.
So, maybe someday that they'll be open, and maybe
How old
not.
are they? How old?
19 and 17.
Okay. They may be when they're grown-ups.
Maybe they're grown-ups, perhaps. And it just has been part of the process of being okay with how things have gone, that um, there was a lot of letting go, because I had been disrespecting myself in the name of love. I had been overgiving and chasing and begging, and it made the balance lopsided, where they start to believe they can treat you in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I learned to treat myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hopefully someday when they've had some experiences, they will want to
I will
reconnect.
give you an open invitation that I have done therapy with situations like this over the
Mhm.
years. I will always be there if you want me to help in any way.
Thanks.
With
Yeah. Yeah. I, I'm
if you
just, yeah, it kind of is where it is right now. And I'm open. I have to wait to see where they
want.
kind of go, because they're still very much attached to the other side. So
Mm.
yeah.
And now, what are your days like? You're working,
I am. I just finished writing a book. And so
Mm.
that's in the editing process right now.
Tell
So
me about the book.
hopefully that will be, we're shooting for August to be published. It's called Performing Normal.
Ah,
And
great.
it is my memoir, but um, it's also a lot of tips and tricks and help, and a journal section too, for people to be able to unpack some of their patterns. So it's both and just about how we abandon ourselves and we
Mhm.
perform our persona until
Mhm.
we no longer can, and what that's like. So
That's gonna
yeah,
be a very helpful book for
I'm I'm
people.
excited about it. I'm excited about it.
And how
I
did that
started
happen? Was it
Well, I
written?
started writing it. I mean, I've been writing it for a really long time, and even when I was, emotionally slutty in my other handle, I was writing it, and I finally had to get a coach to actually, you know, hold me accountable to do it. And so I
Mhm.
did that. And then we were meeting once a week, and I finally said, I just got to go somewhere. And I just went somewhere for 4 days, and I sat down, and I just let it kind of come pouring out.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
so we're just in the editing phase, and
Mhm.
hopefully that'll be done by by the end of May, I guess. And then, yeah, it's just been, I think I had to get to a certain point in my own healing to be able to write what needed to be
Of
written,
course. That makes
because
perfect sense.
for so long it was coming out in like an angry way, or it was coming out in
Mhm.
a sideways sort of way. And I needed to get to a certain place where it could
Mhm.
come out in a really authentic, but not in a blaming anybody sort of way, just as this is the story.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think the timing was just where it needed to be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's right. You need to be where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Good
yeah,
work
so
with
I
that.
do that, and then I'm about to launch a coaching program in just a couple of days on Instagram. So
So let's talk about it.
that's about
Tell me
yeah,
about
so
the program.
that's it's a scapegoat reset. So I've been doing a lot of work around the patterns and the roles that we play in childhood, and specifically around being the scapegoat. And this is just really 8 weeks to work with me, unpacking the cycles, unpacking the patterns. And it really walks through like the reality of what's happening, setting boundaries, understanding the patterns,
Mhm.
understanding and identifying what your reality genuinely is, and then
Mhm.
really helping people with, actual shifts that have to happen for them to be able to stop abandoning themselves.
Mhm.
So I had previously written a workbook, and
Mhm.
so I have someone helping me on the back end, and we've woven them all together. So between
Mhm.
the meetings with me once a week and the workbook that we've woven together, I think it's going to be really exciting just to have the companion together.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm excited about it.
I
I think today is the day 10, and I think we launch tomorrow, and then it will
Oh,
go
congratulations.
active on the day 14. So yeah, it's been in the works for a little bit. It's exciting.
So send me whatever, and I can put it on my stories if you want.
Send you a link.
Send me whatever it is that I would need. Well, send me a link for this show notes.
Okay. Yeah, will do.
And then I can put it in my stories
Thank
as
you very
well.
much. Yeah, appreciate
Of
it. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
looking forward, your future, do you feel good about it?
I do. I feel
Mm.
like things, when we're really walking in alignment, things sort of just open up as they are supposed to. I believe that. So the more I say yes to choosing myself and, saying no to things that don't feel aligned, the more
Mm.
things just kind of open as they're supposed to. So, and the writing coach fell into my lap that sort of way, and the Instagram program has sort of opened up in that sort of way, and other things that are kind of going to be happening too. So it's exciting. It's
Mm-hmm.
interesting too, because in the fall I was supposed to just move away. I had packed up everything and I was getting ready to move away, and then all of this just sort of shifted, and now we're going in a different direction. So it's exciting. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. And
Yeah.
congratulations on all
Thank
these, all of these things. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, all good things.
All good things. Yeah, all good things.
Anything you want to say before we close?
I'm just really excited to have finally gotten a chance to meet up with you and get to hang out with you a little bit. Very exciting. Thank you.
If you're interested in learning more about Your Traitor Within, grab the journal. Visit www.jessicaannpressler.com for more.